All right, everybody. Sometimes there's a generation of coaches who, came up differently, came up the hard way. You heard me and my buddy Zach talk about it all the time when there was no Instagram, no cell phones for a lot of us, no online certifications and things like that. So that meant showing up, shutting up, and kind of earning your stripes the hard way. And now we're in a time where, AI, NIL deals, social media fame, and like personal branding is a big thing. Uh, but here's a big question I have for everybody who's listening to this podcast today. Has what it takes to be a great coach or be elite in the realm of coaching to build a really awesome career and live your passion changed? And I don't really think it has that much, but I think we've gotten a little further away from the truth. So today we're sitting down with a guy who's lived on both sides and kind of done it all, run the gamut of strength and conditioning. So welcome back to another great episode of the Business of Strength podcast. I'm your host, Coach Joe Strong, here to bring you another powerful episode where you can hear the tips, tools, and interviews to turn your passion for strength into a business you could be proud of. I'm joined today by my friend Bo Sandoval. You are the assistant athletic director at the University of Texas A&M. You've been all over the place, Bo, for a whole lifetime of strength, basically. Since I've known you, we met a few years ago through some mutual friends. My friend Zach, we met at Summer Strong with Bert and the guys down there. And one thing that stood out to me immediately was professionalism and the way others. I saw the way other professional coaches were approaching you and speaking to you, and it immediately stood out to me that you were somebody of respect, somebody who was came up and earned other great coaches' respect. So immediately that piqued my interest and wanted to spark up some conversation with you. You built your career the old way. So, today we're going to unpack some of the things that you've done, like what's changed in strength and conditioning, what some of the differences are, the pathway that we took maybe is a little bit different today, and what hasn't. And what young coaches really, this is the business of strength. So we're looking at a lot of, try to make some inferences into. I think there's a lot of young people who don't quite understand how hard it is to make it in the collegiate and or professional realm of coaching. And on the other side of that, on my side of the coin, I don't think there's a lot of people coming out of it. People come to my facility like, oh my God, I want to open up one of these. I was like, well, maybe not. And we'll talk you out of that if we can. So, Bo, thanks for being here with me, brother. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking an hour of your day to spend some time with us.
Sure. No, man, thanks for having me. I'm excited. Always a good chat with you and definitely admire the show and where you guys really drive your IP on educating the next gen, not just in strength and conditioning, but man, that whole entrepreneurial side of the house is it's foreign to a lot of us, and stepping in those waters can be a little tricky. So you guys are kind of sharing from a couple different perspectives, which is pretty cool. Pretty
Thanks,
cool.
man.
So yeah.
I appreciate that, and I think like, I've always admired the college side and the collegiate side and the professional side, people who are a lifelong professional, on the collegiate side. I always think like I always dreamed about having just access to those types of athletes all the time and the facilities and stuff like that. So, maybe that's a good starting point. Take us back a little bit. Give me a little background. Obviously coming up in the industry, I think we're roughly the same age or close to it, like approaching 50, if not already there. I'll be 50 this summer. And I grew up in a time where like it was strength manuals, it was like Black Belt magazine, powerlifting magazine,
Yeah.
going to the old like a towny barbell club where there was a bunch of guys lifting in jeans and work boots and stuff like that, and they would see a couple of young kids working at it, like, yo, dipshits, what are you doing over there? Like, and it was
Mhm.
actual like mentorship. So, how did you get started in strength? How did strength become the thing? And it's like, who were some
Yeah.
of your early mentors?
Sure. I'm about 5 years behind you, but very the time is resonating. I mean, it's the same track. When I started, I had an interest as a high school athlete. I was not very gifted, but I always enjoyed when we went to our little metal building weight room next to our field house where I grew up in my high school. So we had a defensive line coach from our football team who took a passion in that and showed us what he could. The thing that kind of latched on was he wasn't cooking it up on his own, or he wasn't making it up on his own. In fact, we were following VHS tapes from the old Husker Power videos from Boyd Epley. That
Sick.
that that was a big chunk. And then
Okay.
Boots Garland, who at the time was a retired track and field coach from LSU. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana,
Hmm.
and Boots would come over in the summertime and do a little bit of speed work with us. And just seeing that coach, our D line coach, who knew he had a responsibility for speed, strength, and conditioning, he was going and sourcing what he didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And that caught my eye as a 16, 17-year old. Um, I didn't know yet that's what I wanted to do, but I just had a strong interest in it. I didn't miss summer workouts. I never missed spring workouts. When I was a multi-sport athlete and I was doing track and field and other things, I was still showing up for football workouts or track workouts and vice versa, different times of the year. Um, Mainly because I wanted to just learn more and see, like, the different approaches. I was starting to discover that there's a difference in what some of those times
Sure.
in there offered. When I went to school, I was like a lot of other undergraduate freshmen. I knew I needed to get a degree. They had no idea what I wanted to do. But I went early in the summer because I was in state, but I was at a small school, Northwestern State, Louisiana, about 3.5 hours north of where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
So I went early in the summertime and just applied for an on-campus job, and they put me out at the softball and baseball fields cutting grass. And I'm out there doing my thing, working for
The
the grounds
groundskeeping.
crew. Yep.
Yeah.
And the softball and baseball coaches approached me and asked me about being an equipment manager. And I was like, they could give me a stipend, give me a little extra coin in my pocket. So I'm like, sure, that sounds good. Well, into that fall semester, when all the athletes started showing up, I started noticing the softball team going down to the weight room. So I asked the head softball coach, is there any chance I can go down and just watch what they're doing? And she put me in contact with the strength coach, who was a guy named Thad Livingston at the time. And he let me come down and observe and got to know him a little more because he would even come on some of the softball road trips with us and things like
Mm-hmm.
that from time to time. And started to get this idea in my head like, wow, there's like a track you can go and an educational route you can go to do this as a career.
Mm-hmm.
I think I like this. And at the time, I was kind of thinking maybe like athletic training or pre-physical therapy kind of stuff, not knowing there was this whole performance world of strength and conditioning. So after observing with him for a little over a semester, head softball coach took the head job at Southern Mississippi, who was just coming off of a World Series run at the
Oh wow.
time. This was around 99, 2000. And she says, "Hey, I'm taking this job. The school's actually closer to where you grew up, and I can get you the same deal there, even though it's out of state. If you're interested, it's a little bigger school, a little bigger program." And I said, you know what? I would love to do that. And the only thing I ask is, can you get me a meeting with their strength staff the day I set foot on campus? And so she teed that up. I met the head strength coach at Southern Miss. He had an assistant at the time and two graduate assistants. So I met with all four of them and started observing and volunteering that back half of my freshman year. And I did that the entirety of my undergrad with those guys, interning, eventually getting a little bit of class credit for it. Um,
Amazing.
and
And I just want to stop you for 2 seconds, Bo, because
yeah.
like I think like one of the things that obviously I still teach at the university level, a state school here in New
Mhm.
Jersey, and I teach mostly exercise science majors. I teach anatomy and physiology. I've taught
Yeah.
biomechanics, cell biology, stuff like that, right? But primarily A and P. And I think one of the things that I see as an educator and a business owner is the lack of, we'll call it giddy up, for kids to
Mhm.
take control of their own careers really early and
Yeah.
do a summer internship every summer to just say like you said, you just literally raised your hand and be like, hey, can I just come watch? Can I help? I'll rack weights, I'll do whatever.
Mhm.
I think
Sure.
everybody's looking at everything as having to be like a transactional thing, like, oh, if I'm not doing that, if I'm not getting paid. But
Yeah.
I have 75 students in my class, the vast majority who want to be physical therapists. The other half of them want to be strength and conditioning coaches, personal trainers and stuff. And only two kids out of 75 are actually working in the field and doing stuff related to the field. So,
Sure.
do you think like do you think you could become elite as a strength coach and make it, whether it's private sector, collegiate, or pro, without in-person mentorship? Would not be where you're at with unless somebody had kind of say, hey man, let me help this kid out.
Yeah, it's actually a major problem that we're running into. There's two humps. One is the students are getting severely stressed out when they get to that, even my master students, when they're getting close to graduating, they're wanting to get in the job hunt and realizing like I don't have any experience. And literally every
Yes.
job app is responding
Yes.
back to me saying not enough experience.
Hmm.
And I think they think the only experience that counts, and maybe we've done a bad job of conveying this as professionals, that the only experience that counts is paid experience.
Yes.
Whereas I was lucky enough to get mentored by some folks that were like, no, you need tools in your toolbox. Like, why would you expect someone to pay you when you have nothing to offer in terms of intellect? Like, we could get anyone to do
Yes.
that. This is
Yes.
saying that if you're a coach, you have some expertise in instruction and some skills to go along with that. And so that's one, those students running into that roadblock. And then the
Yep.
other one is what you just mentioned. When it is that time frame early on in their undergraduate hours, they don't want to, there's not this burning desire to stretch a 24-hour day. You know, everyone's
Yeah.
whether it's we've just beat them in the head too much with you need 9 hours of sleep, or you know, they
Yeah.
don't know how to time manage things to where they can cram in 4 hours at a gym observing and watching.
Sure.
Some of it is definitely not just having I guess they're a little too naive to understand that if you're just standing in a corner and watching in the beginning, there's a lot to be had from that. Because you don't know anything, you know nothing. So standing in a
Yes.
corner, you're actually going to pick up quite a bit. But then you
Yes.
start to gain some rapport if you have half a personality. You know when and where to ask questions. You're not a pest, but you're seeking. There's a
Yeah.
difference. And so the mentorship side of things, I think that one is a double edge. You got not enough young ones seeking mentorship, but I also think we're full of an industry right now of poor mentorship.
Yeah.
You know, mentorship is quickly turning into, well, if you stay here long enough, I'll give you an opportunity. Versus,
Hmm.
hey, you commit the time here, I'll start educating you from day one. I'll start
Yeah.
sprinkling. To me, the critical piece of that mentorship, which I made a little transition back in May, where I'm actually teaching
Hmm.
in the master's program at A&M. I'm a professor of practice in the school of we call it the PPSC. It's an applied strength and conditioning tract in our master's
Hmm.
program.
This is the in person, Bo. You're in the
This is in
classroom.
person. Yeah.
Great. That's
And
awesome.
well, our classroom's actually a weight room.
The
So
weight room.
it's 50-50 lecture and
Sick.
applied coaching. And so
Fantastic.
everything from technical instruction to, you know, how to manage numbers, how to
Yeah.
manage quality control in small group settings, large group settings,
Love it.
how to disseminate responsibility amongst staff members and
It's
work as a
fantastic.
cohesive assistant. Um, and so one of the biggest things I'm running into is as they go through some of these mentorships, no one's giving them critical feedback. No one is, even
Hmm.
as a young assistant coach, a full-time assistant coach, I always had someone there in a very constructive way saying, hey man, why are you doing that? Like, can you tell me why that is in your planning right now? What's the precursor and what's coming after it? Um, and so we end up with all these professionals that are just grabbing ideas out of the air and they're prescribing it to people. And there's no
Hmm.
thought out process of where they're taking them, why they're taking them there, and how in the hell it correlates to what that person's trying to do on any sort of field of play.
Hmm.
Um, so that part, we got to get better at that in the mentorship of, yes, nurturing, but also they got to go through a little bit of like trial by fire. They got to get in
Sure.
front of an educated professional with a little
Sure.
bit of intimidation and rationalize why they're doing what they're doing. Um, and I would say it's not just on the design side, but on the coaching side. I hear coaches
Sure.
blurt
The
stuff.
soft skills, the soft
Yeah.
skills of coaching. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
I hear some of these coaches blurt stuff out of their mouth, and I'm like,
Yeah.
who the hell would know what you're talking about? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're not even articulating an idea, let alone trying to
Yeah.
show someone how to use their body.
I think,
Um,
yeah, I mean, a lot of young coaches, in my experience too, especially on the private sector, you've had a lot of exposure to professional coaches where,
mhm,
like, again, I hate to say this about my own industry, but when you cross over the desk to the other side, it's the Wild
mhm.
West. The private sector is the
Sure,
Wild West, right?
sure.
You at least to get hired at Texas A&M have to have
Yeah,
some background of qualification,
sure.
degree, certs, things like that. Like minimum
Yep,
an exercise science degree,
sure.
usually a master's, minimum a CSCS, right? And that's like the base level. In my
Yep.
wife can be a world-class expert in personal training by the end of the week if she wanted to, right?
Sure.
And you
Yep.
know, and could go get a certification. So I think we see a lot of like what I've seen in the past in terms of coaching, especially in the soft skill side, is just coaches who default to, screaming and yelling and profanity,
Yep.
and what I'll call hanging out banter, meaning like you're not actively coaching, instigating success or inspiring somebody to
Yep.
do more better. You're just counting reps, barking orders, hanging out,
Yep.
waiting for the next session. Like, oh, I got
Yep.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You got four in a row. And it's like you just,
Yep.
one coffee to the next in a sense.
I always say in the world of coaching, there's two litmus tests. And you're right. To get your foot in the door, you got to have education and accreditation and a resume and all those things. But then you got to pass that one litmus test, which is you got to convince a head coach that you're going to positively influence their program. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
contribute something. So even if some administrator throws you into a coaching role, you've still got more interviewing to do after you take the job to convince that head coach I can offer something that's going to benefit your program. Because what we see often in this day and age, as soon as that's not happening, that coach is going to run to that administrator and go, "You got to find someone else." And they either shuffle you
Yep.
around in a department or they eliminate you and they go find someone else that can be
Yep.
an influence. And then the other one is then you got to pass the athlete litmus test. At some point,
Yes.
that athlete's not going to care anymore how nice you are or how friendly you are or how much you know the lingo.
Right.
They want to know, like, what are you offering me to make me better on the field,
Right.
especially the elite. The
Yes. Yes.
ones that
Did I
don't
get faster,
play that much.
stronger?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Where are you influencing my performance?
Yeah.
Um, and to your point of, just if all I have to fall back on are the expletives and the yelling and the screaming, that only goes so far with an elite athlete. They want to know where the proof is in the pudding. Like,
Yeah.
great coach, you get me fired up. You get me really motivated. I appreciate that. Where are we actually moving the needle?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of coaches get turned off by that question. Like, how dare you question me? I'm the head strength coach. How dare you? When that's their career, that's their livelihood. We should be really good at rationalizing to them why this is important, why it's going to be a dot connector to the other five dots that matter for them to play on the field well. But that's what I always say too. I don't take it totally as a negative because in this
Yeah.
industry, there's levels to this. So for
Yes.
every time someone's not quite up to par, guess what? That's an opportunity for us. I'll gladly take
100%.
I'll gladly
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
that job.
And
Um,
look, that's why we're here together today. I mean, there's
yeah.
for the people, to steal a quote from Bert the team of Sorinex, thin air, deep water, right? It's like
Mhm.
the people who are going to keep climbing are going to keep climbing regardless.
Yeah.
It wouldn't matter to me, and I'm going to make the assumption for you that you're the type of person that if you were a strength coach, an accountant, a finance guy, whatever it was, you're going to be consistently seeking ways to improve your own personal abilities, which generally flows over to the type of person who's going to continue to grow their career, grow their opportunities, and things like that.
Yeah.
So, so every time, there's a huge in the private sector right now, there's been a huge expansion of like what we'll call like global billion-dollar conglomerate style
Mm.
gyms. And they, blew up during the opportunity phase, which was the pandemic. And now we're starting to see a huge retraction. And fitness has always been about process. It's always been about people. It's always been about the eye of the coach, right? And the ability and skills, like you said, the tools that
Mhm.
coach has in their tool belt. You can take, again, even at a place where now we could talk a little bit about the like NIL and the need for big universities like yours to have these
Yeah.
beautiful facilities and all this flash and things like that.
Yeah.
But you could take all the new locker rooms, the fancy training centers, and all that stuff, and throw it in the garbage if you don't have people to execute a real plan
Yeah.
and inspire kids and motivate kids. So, where do
A
you
lot of
see? Go ahead.
I was just going to say a lot of practitioners are getting frustrated because of the NIL and all the transfer rapid transferring. To me,
Yeah.
there's no greater litmus test on how impactful you are. And I don't just speak to the strength coaches, I'm speaking to the sport coaches as well. If you truly have the ability to elevate someone's performance level in whatever they're competing in, you have a better chance of retaining them
Yes.
versus crying and complaining about, wow, they can pond hop anytime they want. Well, if there's ultimate value in what you're doing, and you can get them to
Yes.
connect with that, to me,
Yes.
that's a competitive separator.
No question.
Mm.
Even with us, we talk my
Yep.
whole team. Results equals retention, right? If
Yes.
somebody comes to Varsity House and says, I want to lose 21 pounds, and we don't get them to lose 21 pounds, and like they're here for 6 months, at some point they're starting the value equation in their head. Like, am I
Yeah.
getting what I'm paying for? I'm going to
Yeah.
go somewhere else. And the same thing with a kid. I haven't really gotten faster. I got injured a few times. I got overlooked. I'm not starting the way I want to. And then the
Yeah.
wandering eye starts, right? And they start kind
Sure.
of
Oh yeah.
moving on in a different direction. Well, let's talk about that a little bit with the NIL. Obviously, the landscape's changed.
Hmm.
Today I saw, apparently President Trump is influencing that a little bit and putting some parameters, or working with the NCAA to put some parameters around that, right?
Yeah.
What are you seeing? How has the NIL changed athlete behavior? And are athletes easier to coach, harder to coach? And where are we losing this situation?
I think behaviorally, call it good or bad, what they have figured out is their value. And so
Mm,
they're using that as leverage. For some for
hmm.
good, some not so good. I think it puts even more pressure on the coach as an educator. We've got to
Hmm.
educate them. If you're truly concerned about the well-being of their future, not just physically, but trying to put them in a position to be successful
Yes,
when they leave, then there's got to be some guidance and some education along, more in-depth decisions other than just what the dollar value is.
sure.
Um, and you mentioned things like playing time, and I would say yes, playing time, but also like, do they have an opportunity to contribute to that team? Do they have an opportunity to actually build their brand? NIL is worthless if it doesn't allow you to help build your brand if you aspire to go and use that later on.
Right, right,
And so, I think it does put a few more tasks on to the coaches and coaching staffs, a more responsibility because you're dealing with someone who now knows their value, and knows that if you don't, they can go get that expertise somewhere else. The other thing on behavior, I also think it exposes them a little bit more. And so if you're really using your eyeballs, they can expose themselves to the point where pretty quickly that's a good fit or that's not a good fit. That alternative agenda is overpowering to where they're not contributing to the team.
right,
Coaches have a really hard time letting go of talent when it's like that. The best coaches in the world don't. Yep, see ya, and then they'll find the next one. And there have been some in different genres of sport that have excelled by putting some true parameters and quality control metrics on that to say, look, yeah, you're $1 million athlete, but you're not going to fit in our program. So
right,
go to our conference rival, go to whatever. They're not willing to sacrifice their values, just for the sake of having that talent on the roster. Now, there's some that
right.
still indulge in it quite a bit. Um, but
Yeah,
back to there's levels to this. A true coach is going to know what they can squeeze out of someone
yeah,
that's got some of those barriers because of this financial influence. And they're also going to know I can go take someone with a little less and I can develop a little bit more. Um, and they may still be a high, or an expensive asset. They just have a little bit more bandwidth for growth. And I think that's what they need to learn how to measure. What's the bandwidth for growth, regardless of what the kid costs?
yeah,
Um, Having that as a part of your recruiting process, your interviewing or interrogation process on understanding, can I actually make a difference on this person? Or
right.
is what I get is what I get. And I got to decide that's what we got or it's not for me.
Right, right. And I think, I mean, it's so complicated because obviously we're dealing with humans, and
Yep.
humans have a lot of complicated emotions and things like
Yep.
that, and influence in their lives. So I'm sure you see, just like
Sure.
we see, stability with coaches and or employees, or even the athletes that we have here who have, strong family dynamics. They have a lot of deep thought behind it. It's not just, like you said, it's not just about the dollar
Mhm.
value. It's like, what's going to be the best fit? Who are the best
Yep.
people that are going to be there? Is the coach that we're going to, does that person have longevity, or are they going to be gone in a year or two? Right? There's a
Hmm.
lot of factors, for young athletes to take into consideration, along with the pressure that some of these higher level athletes, especially the elite, are getting from, big company opportunities and like sponsorship opportunities and stuff like that. It's got to be, tough, where, again, back in
Yep.
the day when we were kids, it's just like you just went to college. If you were good enough, you got a scholarship, and you played and you paid, and the
Mhm.
sport was your job. These kids
Mm,
are now like leaving the field, and then they got to go do content creation, go do a guest spot at
yeah,
a car dealership or something like that. So
sure.
it's definitely a little bit more complicated.
I would say the one thing too, I've tried to play devil's advocate on both sides. The one
Sure.
thing that still eats me up a little bit is that, you know, when do you get your paycheck? You get it at the end of the month, right? You've done the work, you get paid for the work. This whole idea of paying them before they've done anything, there's got to be a
Yes.
way to correct this cadence. I
Yes.
believe they have value. I believe they should be
Yes.
getting compensated for what they do. Um, I don't believe they should be compensated for what they have not done.
I
That one
agree.
is the one that I have a difficult time swallowing.
Well, that was, I mean, look at the change they made. I'm sure they're going to make some parameters, put some
Sure.
guardrails around this, right? Because you're seeing big universities like Penn State just reported that they're 500. Now, part of it is the fact that they did a rebuild on their stadium, but they're like
Mm,
their sports program is 500 million in debt, getting closer to a billion after the
yeah.
stadium rebuild. And when they posted the breakdown of all their teams and their revenue, only two teams make money,
Yeah.
football and basketball. So I think like, the NIL is obviously great for the athletes, but I do feel like some schools, maybe if you're
Yeah.
not a Texas A&M, you're a smaller school, it does put a strain on the finances and trying to get a whole if you can't compete, if they don't put guardrails on it and it's just like unlimited, meaning like Texas or Texas
Mm,
A&M or the big boys can do something different than like your smaller schools, well, then
sure.
obviously it's going to create a larger separation and
Yeah.
divide that's going to continue to put a
Yeah.
strain on the system. So
Yeah.
I personally, as a consumer of college sports, liked it better when I could watch a player go through a program for 3 to 4 years and like get really excited about a fourth year or a third, even a third year junior or a fifth year
Hmm.
senior coming back, and it's like now that's just like
Hmm.
it's just like I'm like I don't even
It's
know who's on the
rare.
roster. Yeah, I never see
Yeah.
anybody, and it's the same
I was
people.
telling
So
I was telling a colleague the other day, we're updating a website in our master's program. I was like, man, something I just thought of. It's got to be an absolute nightmare to be an SID for an athletics department right now, updating rosters for a football team or a
yes,
baseball team or a basketball team. I mean, they must just say, screw it. We'll do it once a quarter. I mean,
yeah.
otherwise they'd be doing it every 20 minutes.
Oh, for sure. And
Yeah.
and and the same thing, like ordering all the just like the dumb stuff that you don't think about on the business side,
Yeah.
like ordering name tags for the clothing, the
Yeah.
locker rooms and
Yep.
stuff like that. It's like
Oh
it's
yeah.
wild. Well,
Yeah.
let's I've heard you say many times, process over feelings,
Yeah.
right? And that kind of makes me think of another like analogy, simple, not easy, right? And that's
Hmm.
something we say a lot here, right?
Hmm.
The best businesses do simple things redundantly well over long, long periods of time, right?
Right.
And I kind of think the same thing when I was coaching a ton of guys for the NFL combines and stuff like that. It was really a handful of movements that we would get exceptionally good at
Hmm.
and just repeat them at nauseum until they were sick and tired of doing them. So,
Yeah.
talk to me about training. What are some principles that, in your tool belt that you think will stand the test of time from now for the next generation, another 50 years
Yeah.
from now, that weight rooms across the country are still going to be using some of these principles?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'll hit on the one you've already mentioned, that this idea of process over feelings. Um, Process meaning an intentional plan, a strategy, and commitment to a strategy. I can't tell you how many strength coaches recently I've talked to, and they talk to me about their program. Coach, can I get your insights? Can you help me, like, maybe help evolve this program? And we go through this long explanation. And I'm like, you haven't even covered the important part yet. Well, prior to your plan, which is, how do you want to play the game? How does your coach want to play the game? You're working with linebackers. Like, how are your linebackers expected to play the game? That's the start of
Right.
the needs analysis. And now we can build a process for that. The feelings part is we just get too emotional in making decisions. And
Yes.
some of that emotion might come from the athlete. It might come from a parent in that private sector area. It may come from a different direction, but we're just taking this snapshot feeling and, oh well, let's just change this, versus backing up, really absorbing the process and, wait a minute, we haven't let this maturate yet, we haven't let this
Yeah.
kind of play out. And nothing with human tissue is instant.
No.
It's not, right. It's all got a slow cook process to it. So,
That's a
um,
great soundbite right there. Nothing with human tissue is instant because you would think, especially when
yeah,
it comes to youth sports,
yeah,
that like, that like little Johnny can just gain 20 pounds. And I have parents come in here in the summertime, be like, my son needs to put 20 pounds on. I was like, you should have came 2 years ago.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. As part of like my integration talks and stuff, we constantly talk about like the resources that we rely on as strength coaches. I always tell them like adaptation doesn't happen in this room. We're all stimulus in here. The adaptation part has so many other factors when it comes to rest and recovery and fueling. And so I always say, like, we want like the all-encompassing approach. I need to have some influence or some counterparts influencing the
Mhm.
nutritional aspect of how we're
Sure.
fueling and hydrating for this thing. And then the sleep and recovery is kind of a behavioral thing. So there's a huge psychology aspect to it in terms
Sure.
of for every bit that I take out of the tank, what am I doing to restore it?
Sure.
And that's all part of the process as well. So, um, yeah, along, just kind of core principle along with this whole process oriented mentality is, um, along with process has to come great execution. And so there's a quote on my door. Anytime a student comes in and they ask me a question, I use at some point in the conversation, I'm going to point to it, and it's positional accuracy governs load. And if you really boil that down and simplify it, it's accuracy has to be the foundation first. Foundationally, you have to be um,
Hmm.
upskilled or literate in the thing that you're doing, and then we can load it with something. We can put a speed requirement on it. We can put poundage on it. We can add tonnage to it. We can add
Sure.
volume to it. But until you can do the skill, if you do add those things, you're adding volume to something that you suck at. So are we getting good at being better or are we getting good at
Right.
being bad? And so
Right.
positional accuracy governs everything. That is, and so what that does to the coach, if that's my mentality, is everything has got a standard of execution that we have to have. It's as simple as a jumping jack or a push up, or yes, into the more complex barbell movements. You've
Hmm.
got to have some fundamental prerequisites before we get into this loading scheme.
Hmm.
I've listened to far too many coaches when someone just being introduced into something and they say something like move the bar as fast as you can or move your feet as fast as you can. They don't even know where
Right.
to put their feet yet. How are they going to?
Right.
I
Right.
mean, they can move as fast as they can. It'll look like an unorganized mess.
Right.
Um, and then we expect some level of expertise to come out of that. And that to me is a little bit just backwards in terms of the recipe of success long term. So your quote of, do simple things, just kind of
Simple,
savagely
not
well
easy.
over
Yeah.
time, simple, not easy. That falls hand in hand. There's this executional expectation that kind of has to be laid in the ground first. Back to our conversation on upcoming coaches, if coaches are like, hey, I want to get to the fancy stuff, the new stuff, you got to master the simple stuff first. Like um,
Yeah, I think
watching
that
a,
that was my next question is
yeah,
what are coaches over complicating? And it's like when I see like their
yeah,
exercise selection pool, there's like 500 things in there, and I'm
yeah,
like, no, you don't need like 90% of that.
yeah. You watch something, and I think a big part of that is they don't understand how to connect dots between the concepts that they're teaching. So I'll watch a
Sure.
coach teach a box jump, and you look at jump mechanics, and at some portion of the jump mechanic, there's a hybrid hinge and squat going on, right?
Hmm.
But they don't ever connect the dot to that to their RDL. They're doing a super stiff-legged RDL. It's like, well, that's a great kind of posterior chain exercise, but is it correlating to your jump mechanics? Or they're teaching a kettlebell swing and the hinge looks different than this one. It's like, wait a minute, how's that going to correlate to them being able to push when they jump or an Olympic
Hmm.
lift? If they're not if they're hinging different in that, and so if you have this foundational expectation of how something's to be executed, a hinge starts to look like a hinge. A squat starts to look like a squat. A single leg version of a squat starts to look like a squat. A single leg version of a
Yeah.
hinge. You know what I mean? And when we get
Yes.
into um, all these propulsive types of action, sprinting, bounding, jumping, at some phase in their execution, we should start to grab snapshots of these other positionally accurate things that we've taught in other different segments of the training process. Well, when they can't connect any of those and everything looks exponentially different from everything else, I'm like, well, are you creating a system, a
Yeah.
progressive system towards something, or are you just throwing random stuff out there? Nothing has any correlation to itself.
So
I have a
like by listening to you speak too, and your depth of knowledge in the realm of condition, in the realm of training, right? I think that's a big miss in the private sector where they spend very little time on they spend a lot of time on programming because I will say that most of the coaches that we deal with um come to us with help on the business side. And I said, well, let me look at your product. They're like, oh, we don't need any help there. I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, nobody programs like us. I said, well, all right, well, let me see what you're doing because like you said, we want to make sure that that your overarching vision for what the training is supposed to be and the outcome that we're trying to get not only matches what you're actually putting on the gym floor, but also is a profitable model that we could scale and actually feed people through. Because in the
Mhm.
private sector, your capacity and how many people you could train per hour is the moneymaker, right? So like again, if you want to do heavy barbell work, it's like, okay, well, we could probably only fit like a handful of people in a single space using
Mhm.
barbells. But if we want to go to like more of a boot camp slash dumbbells and like body weight stuff, well, now you could have a room full of 20, 30 people, right? So
Yeah.
the methodologies are different, but a lot of coaches don't have they don't spend the time training proficiencies with their staff, and they don't spend the time literally
Mm.
writing down and filming a perfect execution and identifying what you're saying is like, this is what perfect looks like. This is the standard. Let's review it together as a team, go over it.
Mhm.
Everybody high fives and stamps it. Yes, that's what a perfect squat looks like. Okay, great. We move on to the next
Yeah.
exercise. And now it's
Yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
I think
And
like a lot of people think they're above that. And it's like, no, no, every quarter we review the delivery of our most core basic lifts every quarter,
mhm.
and it's like,
I think sometimes it's just misinterpreted as like you're taking away some of their autonomy. But
yeah, yeah, their
there's still
creativity.
autonomy. Yeah, there's still autonomy in delivery and in language.
Yep.
And even when it gets into the programming nuance, you can still strategize how you want. But when it comes to movement literacy and proficiency, there's not a lot of gray area between effective and ineffective. It's like it's
Yeah.
either effective or it's not.
Yeah.
Now there's scaling, and that's another one. You can tell the difference between an experienced and an inexperienced coach by how easily they can scale up or down, depending on who's standing in front of them. So when a
Yes.
new set of context comes in, that thing that they always teach and they run into a roadblock, if they're a great coach, they're going to be able to scale that and bust it into
Yes.
little chunks so that
Yes.
they can insert that person and meet them where they're at. When you got not that much experience, man, that becomes a really complex problem to solve when you
Yes.
don't have the ability to scale
How
those
do how
things.
do you deal with that? Like on your end, on in the collegiate end, obviously you're going to get you're going to get undergraduates that are going to generally wind up becoming grad assistants, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who then become either part-time or full-time hires as coaching staff. So there's a progression there. How do you guys deal with getting somebody from like the undergraduate level to the graduate level and integrating them into your system when they are a little bit lower on the proficiency square? Where do they
Yep.
generally start? Where do they generally start for you guys?
I think the important part is not to overshoot their knowledge base, regardless of how confident they are, how great a personality they have, how easily they interact with athletes and coaches. You got to kind of remember just to bite off tiny chunks for them at a time.
Hmm.
Um, and they've got to show masterfulness in those things before just adding a bunch of other things. Not to mention, they're not going to know this. We have to constantly remind ourselves to monitor that they're developing their own philosophy and their own sort of prioritization list at the same time. So even
Hmm.
though I'm teaching them a skill mentally at the moment, that might not be the most prioritized skill to them. We've got to kind of remember that. And so the more
Yeah.
stuff we throw at them, they may be putting the wrong things at the top of the priority list. And so I always say, if I'm teaching someone and bringing them up from the ground level, I'm going to teach them what I think are the highest things on the priority list, which for me is going to be how do you monitor posture? If you can monitor posture, finding a neutral spine, bracing in one thing, you should be able to do it across the board in everything. And those
Sure.
two things are going to be involved in everything we do. There is a posture related to everything that we do. There's a breathing scheme related to everything that we do.
Yes.
Um, then we can get into all right, let's ground-based movements. I'm going to always bust it into some really simple chunks in terms of movement requirements. Squatting, hinging, pushing, pulling, um, uh, I also throw in there climbing, crawling, more of your functional kind of human skill set. Like
Hmm.
every human should know how to crawl. Well, we were built for it. We
Yes.
should know how to crawl around on the ground. We should know how to climb a ladder. We should know how to, how to coordinate pulling with our hands while we're pushing with our feet. Um, and then along this, getting them to start observing early. And you
Hmm.
can tell the difference between when it's a new intern and or if it's someone that's got a little experience. How much are they observing what's actually happening? You mentioned we get caught up a lot of times in the, especially if you have the gift of the gab, we get caught up in just the banter and the chit chat.
Yeah.
Next thing I don't realize, oh, his feet are out of position, or his
Yes.
center of mass is not over his base of support anymore, or he's not in sync, he's not connected. That's why he's not getting all the speed from his feet and all that energy into the barbell. If they're paying attention, they start to figure out where those gaps in the chain are,
Sure.
along with some assistance of us explaining it to them. But I think monitoring those kind of things constantly. So I give a lot of feedback when I get interns or newbies. There's usually a debrief after every session. We got a quick few minutes to talk about things. I'll let them pop off a couple of questions. If there's not a lot to address, I might even get to some of those questions. But I would say 90% of the time, after they ask their questions, I'll be like, that's a great question. But let me tell you something you're overlooking. When we have this group doing this, your vantage point is over here. You're missing half of what's going on. Let me show you how to position yourself so that you can actually pay attention. And you might have some more viable questions next
Great
time
point.
that
Great
pertain to what
point.
we're actually doing, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I don't do that in an insulting manner. It's just like I want their relevancy to
No, but
be,
there's nuances that I think like a
yeah,
22-year-old kid might not realize. It's like you're
yeah,
I know you're a little nervous. I know it's your first month in the
mhm,
as like a grad assistant or an intern or whatever it is. But if you stand all the way in the corner, you can only see like six kids. You train
yeah,
like you gotta,
yeah,
body position. When we talk about it all the time, like you train the group of people, like face the crowd, be in a position to see everything,
yeah,
and you want to be in a position where like, hey, Bo, what are you doing back there, right? If you can't
yeah,
see it, then you don't know, right?
totally, totally. So I do say if you have it in your plan that you're going to take on interns or you're going to take on GAs or whatever, there's a lot of responsibility with that. And if you're not equipped or you're not willing to put a ton of time into them, you're going to get frustrated
Yeah.
because it doesn't happen by osmosis. They're going to have to learn from you. And so if you have this expectation, they're just going to pick it up by watching, and you're not going to have to spend any time with them. I don't think so. I also think that's where some of the flaws are in our mentorships. Is
Sure.
our mentors? There's not as many mentors spending enough personal time with them, not just educating them in that fashion, but also influencing them to some of the things we hit on, the
Yes.
philosophical approach, helping them identify what are their staples in their thought process, character values,
Yep.
learning empathy and understanding when to push an athlete and when to carry them a little bit, understanding when it's an effort deficit or versus when it's a technique deficit. Um, some for some reason coaches still think sometimes, hey, go harder, it'll go better. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, no, dude, it sucks. If he goes harder, it's
Yeah.
just gonna suck harder. Like,
Yeah. And the potential for injury obviously goes way up,
yeah,
right?
totally, totally. So I just think they're high maintenance, man. Interns are high maintenance, and you got to be willing to put a
Yeah.
lot of time into them.
Yeah, it's
Um,
funny. And now, like for us, I look at like our internship has been the primary way in which we built our company. And we started that
mm,
organically the very first year that Dan and I partnered up. And we had a lot of time. At that time, we only trained athletes, right? So it was mostly in the afternoon in the private sector, right?
mhm,
Kids get out of school, we would train the kids. So I had all day to spend with the interns. And as the company grew and got busier, we had to add more people to that process. And it was like, hey, you're going to be with Joe on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You're going to be with Dan on Monday. You're going to be right. And we've got to start to divvy it up. Now, I think we should have six interns this summer.
nice.
I've had close to 100 applications, but it's a full-time job between a group of people basically raising our children, right, and giving them the best
Yeah.
opportunity to be successful. And not just for me, it's not just about teaching them the X's and O's, like you said. It's about making sure they understand the industry, they understand what it takes to be successful, and that they have a real passion. And I think a
Mhm.
summer internship, especially for us and or for someone like yourself, right, it's a real opportunity for them for the first time to stand on a gym floor for 10 hours a day and really make sure that they absolutely love it. Like, is this,
Yeah.
the kids that I know love it are the ones who ask me when we're done for the day, can I stay and train?
Yeah.
That's how I know that they
Sure.
want it. Or like their shift starts at 11, they're going to be here like 11 to 8 or whatever, and they're here at 9 o'clock working out, and they get in early and they get their training in, and it's like, all right, you know, at least if somebody has a true passion for training,
Mm.
right? We have something to work with, right? And I think that's
Hmm.
something that I see a lot. Is just the passion that we had, and like the fact that we had mentors, we had to go seek them out. And it was like, for me, it was a little bit of a different path because I was mostly on the private sector. So I was going to workshops, mentorships. I was lucky that I had some really great people around me. But
Hmm.
I think, but the underlying it, I was going to be going to the gym after work, regardless of what I was doing. So as
Hmm.
the wheels in my head kept spinning, it was like, all right, like this is what I love anyway, and I'm gonna be doing this anyway. How do I turn this into a job? Because
Yeah.
if I'm driving home from my accounting job at 5 o'clock, I'm gonna be at the gym till 8 o'clock anyway. So
Yeah.
might as well make some money doing it, you
Definitely.
know.
Definitely.
So if you walk, here's a kind of a loaded question. Years and years of experience, very heavy on the X's and O's and the outcome based, process of sports science.
Hmm.
If you walked into a hundred gyms, what are two or three things that universally that you think you would change, whether it's college or private sector? Private sector, you probably have a field day. We might not want you here.
Yeah. Well, I just think I think the first
What do
thing
you
to kind of look
fix?
at is what they're providing. Does it match the context that they're dealing with? You can pick
Hmm.
up on pretty quick if they're just doing whatever so and so did with them in their day at the previous
Right.
play. You know what I mean? If they're just kind of
Like, is there philosophy and
copying out,
outcome?
yeah, have they devised a strategy? So an easy way I kind of check on this, it's kind of like what I did when I first came to A&M. My first semester and a half here, I didn't change a thing. And I kept getting that question because I was the new director and I was overseeing all these people and all these programs and all these different facilities. And they're like, "Well, what are you changing?" I'm like, "Well, nothing right now. I don't even know what's going on yet. I need to see what the status quo is." And along those lines, I'm assisting and I'm helping and I'm taking notes, and there's little micro, feedback things that I'm throwing in there, but no big giant administrative changes until I've got some idea what the context is. Because if I do change something, hopefully I'm something we're going to be married to for a while. It's because it's got a strategic impact on how we're delivering services or how we're reaching those very intentional outcomes that you mentioned.
Hmm.
So I kind of observe that. How much are they meeting the context that's right in front of them? The the other thing that I look at is how much is small staff, big staff, whatever. How much are they on the same page? And I don't
Hmm.
mean like they're all doing the same thing. They don't have to be doing the same thing, but the priorities should look similar. The language
Hmm.
should start to have some crossover. You mentioned getting together and you guys having an agreement on what is the standard for execution for a particular drill or exercise. That's a pretty recognizable thing. If you walk into a room, you look over, one coach has got this unorganized mess going on. You watch this other coach, and it looks like, wow, that is pristine. I don't know that I've ever seen it done that well. There shouldn't be a discrepancy in the quality
Sure.
going on in the
Sure.
same room. Um,
Sure.
the other thing I would just say is, are the athletes at the center? You can pick it up quick. You'll
Yeah.
know when you just spend a little time and walk around and listen and observe. Is the athlete really the star in there? Or is it a coach? Or is it an owner or somebody
The
else?
brand. Yeah.
Yeah. Is to me, none of us would have jobs if those athletes weren't standing there. If your patrons weren't standing there, we wouldn't have jobs. So constantly keeping them at the forefront of it, that's what's driving our philosophical approach, maybe even our philosophical pivots, is how we're servicing our clientele, our patrons. Um, I think that's a pretty easy vibe to pick up on. And usually the easiest way to pick up on it is look 6 months down the road. Is that business still standing there? That, yeah.
Especially like I said on our end, the gym industry is unfortunately, ripe with going
Mm,
out of business. I think 85% of all gyms that open up are out of business in their first year. So that's pretty
golly.
crazy stat, right? And most of them are out of business in 5 years. It doesn't most don't make it. We're crossing the 20-year mark in May, which is
Amazing.
yeah,
Wow.
which is crazy. It's honestly like I have to pinch myself sometimes because I'm humbled by the fact that not only other great coaches, but but so many great clients have come to the doors. Like I'm sure you have athletes who send you a
Mm,
note here and there, or
yeah.
send you a picture of them and their kids and stuff like that. And that to
Yeah.
me, that's the best legacy. I used to think kind of let's call it like selfishly. Right. And
Yeah.
maybe at one point in the early stages of Varsity House, I was one of those coaches where it was more about me and my money and my
Yeah.
brand and my company. Right, and I thought that my legacy was going to be like I'm going to be the next Charles Palkman. I'm going to be the greatest coach in the world. And then I started realizing that my legacy was really just all the kids and the people and the employees and everybody
Yeah.
that I influenced to, whether some of our employees have gone on to be college coaches. Some of our employees have gone on to open up their own gyms, and a lot of our athletes, when they move back to the community to start their own families, one of the first places they call is here. Hey man, you still take like some washed up old meathead back to
Yeah.
train? I was
Yeah.
like, well, you ain't as old as me, so come on in. So and they
Yeah.
move back into town with two kids and a wife, and it's like wow, that's super cool, right? It's a great
Yep.
feeling. So let's talk about kind of shift things a little bit. Obviously, part of our friendship sparked from our mutual love of the outdoors and hunting, right?
Hmm.
And avid hunters and outdoorsmen. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
What lessons have you learned from hunting that you could apply to coaching and life?
Yeah, man. Well, a really easy one to jump on because we already been talking about it is process over feelings. I
Sure.
mean, how many feelings do the outdoors draw out of us, right? Whether it's success and we're elated,
Oh yeah.
we had all the dopamine hitting, and then just the brutal failures of,
Oh
it's expensive, it takes a ton of time, you're not
yes.
promised anything, nothing is given. And so it really gets you to value like, okay, I got to think this out. If I'm going to outsmart this animal in its environment, and I have every disadvantage known, they have unbelievable advantages in their
Sure.
environments. I've got to have a plan and a process on how I'm going to go about doing this, within the laws, the constraints, public land,
Sure.
private land, what, you name it, the weapon system I'm using. And so that whole preparatory process leading into, I love that because it correlates so well with
Me
strength and
too.
conditioning. You want to go and kill a whitetail with a bow, like you've got to spend time shooting, a lot of time.
Yes. Lots of
And
time. Yeah.
then you've got to put pressure on yourself. You've got to learn how to be quiet. You got to learn woodsmanship. You got to understand your territory and your time of day. And it's very technical. I know
Yeah.
everyone thinks, oh, yeah, you just go out there and you throw a bag of corn on the ground and then you sit there and wait for
Yeah.
something to come eat it. But
No, no, no.
when you're actually fair chase,
Yes,
stalking something in its own environment, and the goal is you don't want it to know it's there until either that bullet pierces its skin or that arrow pierces its chest. That's the ultimate, like that's the point I want to get to, is making that happen and they never even know we're there. Deer be deer, bears be bears, until they figure out like, wow, there's a burning sensation in my chest right now,
right. What
and
just happened?
what just
Yeah,
happened, right? So yeah, I love it. Definitely have drawn more of the last like 10 to 12 years, gotten closer to the physical side of it, wanting to do more adventurous things where you're having to cover more ground, getting a little bit more treacherous territory,
sure.
having to really earn it. I just think that's trying to get back to some ancestral roots a little bit,
Yeah, yeah,
of just, doing it the hard way. I feel the same way about elite sports. Like there's not an
sure.
easy shortcut. If you want to be elite at it, it's hard, man. It's you still have to be strategic and you got to have a strategy, but it's hard. It's a lot of hard
Yeah,
work over a long period of
I have.
time.
How many friends have you had that say, "Oh man, I'd love to go hunting. You take me hunting one day?" And it's
Yeah,
like, yes, but it's not quite that simple. Like you can't just
yeah,
like come hunting. They're like, "Well, what do you
yeah,
mean? I want to shoot a bow." I was like, "Well, archery." and bow
Yeah.
hunting are completely different things, right? You could
Totally.
go get a
Yeah.
bow and shoot, and we can go to a range, and I'm happy to give you pointers and shoot with you. But like then taking that bow into the woods to process an animal, right? Well, now you have to shoot that bow thousands of times before we even go in the woods. And
Yeah.
B, you have to learn the hunting aspect, which is, stalking, tracking, and positioning yourself to even
Yeah.
see an animal. Like, most of my friends would be like, yeah, there's deer everywhere here in North Jersey.
Yeah.
It's got to be so easy. I was like, yeah. Well, the second you step in the woods and crack one twig, they're gone,
Gone.
man. Like,
Yep.
yeah, I could shoot a deer in my front lawn every day would the laws
Yeah.
allow it. But the second
Yeah.
I, crack a twig or step on a pile of leaves, it's over. Right? You're
It's
done
over.
for.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think the same
Yep.
thing is kind of like you look at youth sports bow, and it kind of reminds me similarly of the people who think like hunting is oh, just take me hunting, where
Mm.
it's like, here's a real stat that I got from the youth. I believe it was the Youth Sports of America Association, right? It was 17%. It was just over. It was like 17.2% of parents of youth athletes under the age of 16 think their kid has a shot to go pro,
Mm.
right? So that means basically, let's call it 20% for the sake of meathead math. That means one in every five, like my son, Antonio, there's 30 kids on his baseball team. That means, five or six of those kids are making it to the Yankees or the Mets or something like
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
no, not happening. And I think like people forget that the process, like you said earlier on, the process of tissue development is a
Hmm.
very long process, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think like a lot of parents, but now we're in a situation where you have this year-round periodization for sports, more and more club teams, and more travel programs and stuff like that. I have a lot of kids that my son, who's going to be 9 this year, plays with, who are already playing year-round baseball. And the
Yeah.
parents are so hung up on the skill development. And my son's like, Dad, should I be doing, should I play club team? I was like, don't worry about that now, bud. You're 9 years old. We're not worried about club team. We're worried about getting faster, stronger, more
Hmm.
resilient, building great work ethic, and loving the process of training, because training as the base of the sports pyramid translates, as you know, to everything. Where
Yeah.
like a skill, if you want to learn how to hit that bat, well, we hire a guru, we get some lessons, we could spend a year swinging the bat, and we're gonna get the skill. But
Yeah.
if you get to high school and the coach says, "Hey, man, you're like way too slow, way too weak. You got to put on 20 pounds of muscle." Well, that's not happening anytime soon. Now we're talking at,
No.
a long process,
Yeah.
if ever, to play catch up. So, you know,
Yeah.
it,
Totally.
it, some great lessons. I think hunting gives you that great lessons too. I have spent most of my life in the woods to process a handful of quality animals, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yep. I'm with you.
yeah,
It's some.
I don't post a lot of it because I'm that's not my brand on social media and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's like it's far and few between. The people who know me is like, yeah, I can show you like 4 or 5 great pictures. The rest of them are just like your average run of the muck, boars and does.
Yeah. Yeah. On average, I'll spend, and I'm not a professional hunter by any means, but I'll spend 20 to 50 days a year on a hunt, on some turkeys, deer, pigs. Um, 2 of those days, I might do something, you know.
Yeah,
And then there's been years where I strike out. I'll sit 50 times and I don't get
nothing.
anything. And
Oh,
I don't know. That might be some of the thing that keeps drawing me back. Like if you're competitive, it's
yes,
just like I'm just gonna
yes,
keep beating my head against that wall until
yes.
I make this happen. But
Well, that's why I love bow hunting so much, because bow hunting is like training.
mhm.
You cannot put it down. If you put the bow down, you lose the bow skill. And I'm
Yeah,
not I'm not negating anybody who's got high level marksman skills with handguns or rifles and things like that. But I do feel like those skills are easier to maintain. The bow
sure.
requires like literally everyday usage to be top level,
Yeah.
accurate, right? And so, I always thought, from the training perspective, like, you have to do something every day, right? And I
Mhm.
do, I move, the needle a little bit every day. I have my primary training days, right? But I do something every day. That's just how my
Yeah.
mechanism works. Me,
Yeah.
I'm either a blast or dust. I'm either doing the thing or I'm on vacation, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I need everyday habits in my schedule. And the same thing with the bow. When I decided that, I was going to primarily be a bow hunter years ago, it was like, all right, well, I'm either going to get really freaking good at this, or I'm just not going to do it. right?
Yeah.
I'll just keep shotgun hunting. Here in Jersey, you can't rifle hunt shotgun or
Right.
bow, right? So it's like I'm
Yep.
either just going to go shoot my deer with my shotgun or hunt some turkeys, or I'm going to be this bow hunter, and that means I'm going to
Yeah.
do it every day. So me, what does a me head, with a dream do? He builds a bow range in his basement, and it's like I go get the bow. Now I shoot the bow every day. So my morning routine is literally I do my morning cardio, I shoot the bow, I go work out in the garage,
Yeah.
and that's my
Beautiful.
process, right? That's my
Yeah.
process.
Yep. That's awesome.
Hey, I got
Yeah.
some rapid fire questions for you. We could,
Okay.
um, I wanted to hit you up as a professional coach. What's the most overrated trend you see in strength and conditioning right now?
Mm, most overrated trend. Um, I have I'm gonna preface this because it's gonna make it sound like I'm defacing it, but it's acquiring sports science, but not integrating sports science. There's a
Mm-hmm.
mad dash after tech and data
Mm,
and gadgets and things, and we haven't even stepped back to come up with again another process on how am I going to institute that to make a difference.
yes.
I heard a great presentation. I spoke at a
Well, we
conference at
want
the
it, but we don't know what to do with it yet, kind of
exactly.
idea. Yeah,
And
yeah.
they, some of it is this idea like, well, if we have that, well, it'd be better for our recruits. Well, until the recruit finds out, that's just a paperweight. We don't actually do anything with that.
Yeah, yeah.
But I heard a great presentation. Joe Kinn's son, Peter Kinn, I spoke at the University of Texas. They hosted an NSCA regional conference a couple weeks ago, and Joe Kinn's son gave this presentation on entry level sports science. And what he meant by that was how do you begin, if you're a small school, you're starting to get some assets, how do you begin to implement sports science? And he gave almost a periodized approach of starting really small, mastering implementation, mastering data utilization, something like a jump mat and getting jump data scores from that. And then how do you use that to influence your programming? And then trickling on other additional metrics from different resources to start actually building profiles that drive decision making. It was
Mm,
brilliant. It was really simple. And he even did it from a low budget perspective. You don't need to buy $30,000 force plates and all this other, yet. If you got those aspirations, great. If you do it this way, you'll at least have systems in place. But by the time you buy that really expensive piece of equipment, you've actually got a methodology on how you're going to install it into your system
right,
and use the data to drive more informed decisions. So, yeah, it's not sports science that's overrated. It's this idea of acquiring it, but they
right,
have no plan on how they're going to use it. It's
right.
happening
I
all
think
over.
just
It
new,
happens.
I'm
We do it.
sure.
We're guilty of it here at A&M.
Yeah,
We've got departments that buy all kinds of stuff, and it's like, what has that yielded, other than another bill to pay?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. More
so
toys. What do you think? What's your best advice for a young coach? You're a college, freshman or sophomore, and you're thinking that the field of strength, whether it's private sector or collegiate, is your way. You want to get an exercise science degree. You're thinking you want to be a strength coach. What's the best advice you give them?
start getting your nose in it now. Start getting experience now. There is somewhere close by, probably, there is a place where you can observe, you can volunteer, you can, whether it's just a quick interview or it's a long-term thing once a week, whatever. There might be several that you could dash your time out into, but start getting experience now. One,
Amazing.
you're going to start to understand, do I actually want to do this? At the same time, you may be acquiring skills that will then prepare you to get a more significant position as a volunteer, as an intern, or a paid intern. And whether you know it or not, as soon as you dip your toes in it, you're starting to build your profile.
Hmm.
And so the more that you're accumulating, you
Like
build
that.
your resume, whatever. So the accumulation of that is very important. Don't be one of those that waits till your last semester of graduate school and you're like, shit, I want to apply for this job. You're applying for jobs that several hundreds others are applying to, and they may have 10 times the experience that you have.
Yeah, yeah. Earlier,
So
earlier the better for sure.
no doubt, no doubt.
What separates good from great? What have you seen? The best of the best. Another mutual friend of ours, Rusty Witt,
Yeah.
got the job recently down in Florida. Guys,
Yep.
guys, guys, an amazing human, great guy. Another guy I would put in the great bucket. What is it about some of the great coaches, whether it's private or collegiate, that makes them great?
Ooh, it is multifactorial, but I would say a couple things that they just all have in common is growth mindset and consistency. Um, Someone like Rusty, I mean, Rusty's older than I am. That dude's still learning
Hmm.
today. He's
Yes.
still adapting today. He's still
We
cultivating.
we went down a 40-minute rabbit hole at Winterstrong telling me about his new programming ideas and this new
Yeah,
technology he's got and what he's trying to do for spring ball. I was like, you could just tell he lit up like a Christmas tree. Like he was so
yeah,
excited with all his new
yeah,
toys and stuff that he's got down there at Florida.
totally. Yeah, that growth mindset, that's a huge separator for the elite. They never stop thinking. They never stop reviewing and evaluating what they're doing. Is it good enough? Is there a better way? Is there optimization that I'm missing out on? And then the consistency. I mean, consistency is the most terrifying thing in human
Hmm.
existence. And
Yeah.
coaching, elite coaching, it requires it. We got our own emotions, we got our own problems, our own bills to pay, our kids to raise, all these things. But a consistent approach to how we deliver what we do is really important. So learning how to drop your shit at the door, go in and kind of deliver on a very consistent basis, with a consistent skill set, a consistent language. Um, and look, we're in the business of developing people. So whether we like it or not, we got to devote some level of energy towards encouragement and growth and support, because we're trying to help, whether they're young or old, athletes, patrons, clientele. We're
Yep.
trying to help them reach whatever their next level is. That's what we do by nature.
Amazing. Last question. If people want to get in touch with you, contact you, see what you got going on, we didn't get a
Yeah,
chance to mention, some of the work built stuff. Bo and his
yeah.
friends put together a really great training. They're putting together a training platform for
Mhm.
outdoorsmen and people that want to take their outdoorsmanship to the next level and also maximize their fitness and retention. Talk to me a little bit about like what are some of the things you have going on? Where can people contact
Yeah.
you?
Sure. Easiest way to contact me is email, and I don't mind throwing out my email, and I'll give out my Instagram as well. I will say this: I'm not always the fastest to get back, but I always get back. I've had folks that I'll message and they'll be like, "Oh man, that was like a month ago." I'm like, "I apologize for the delay." But I will get back to you. One thing that kind of rubbed me wrong when I was coming up is all those unanswered messages, man. Even if
Yeah.
it was just to call me back and say, "Hey, I'm not interested," I would appreciate
Yes.
that versus just dead silence. So,
Likewise.
my email is B Sandoval at TAMU. That's TAMU.edu. My Instagram handle is Bo.Sandoval. You can DM me on there, follow along. I post all kinds of stuff, training stuff, a lot of stuff about my family, the outdoors. That's just my Instagram, my personal Instagram. That's just me, who I am. Whenever I got
Hmm.
a feeling or I want to dump something, I dump it. Um, the work built at Instagram is at work.built. So myself and my colleagues, we got a foursome of founders that are trying to bring tier one strength and conditioning to the outdoor and adventure space. We're going to come down some other verticals down the road as well, with some youth athletics as well as some emergency personnel, first responder stuff, but our kind of entry point is into this outdoor space. So we're really
Amazing.
excited about that. We started to put out a little bit of content, teasing along. We're hoping to officially launch that website, as well as a supportive app and a community, later this summer. So we're
Amazing.
cooking on that right
Well,
now.
I got a
Yeah,
little taste, obviously, at Winterstrom. My
yeah,
son made the gram with the
yeah,
work built
man.
gram, right?
He's a
He's a little
stud.
beast.
Yeah,
He's a great little dude, and but I really appreciate your time, Bo. I appreciate the
yeah.
friendship, all the insight, the conversations we've had on the back end when nobody's watching. So thanks for
Mhm.
being receptive, being somebody who gives back as much as they take from the industry. And
Yeah.
this is the business of strength. We hope you had a great lesson and learned something today.
Yeah, heck yeah. Let's do it again. I had a blast, man. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thanks,
Yeah.
Bo.